site manager neglected to take care of my property. So I cost the property management company over $500K. Some background: I 35 male, own a 72 units apartment complex. When I bought it, it was in a good shape and I spent several million getting all apartments renovated. The rent wasn't increased for any of the tenants and I made sure that it never went up by more than $50 a year for lease renewals. Baked into the leases, shortly after all the renovations were completed, I started the search for a property management company and ultimately settled on one that seemed well aligned with wanting to put the tenants first. As we were doing the contracts, I had my real estate friend also look at them. Between him and my lawyer, they recommended having a clause added in there. The short of it is, if there are any legal actions brought up against me for the apartment complex due to neglect of the property management staff, the property management will be responsible for all those costs and any legal fees incurred. This wasn't added in secret, and the legal team from the property management company agreed and everything was finalized. They took over the management of the complex a month later. I was fairly hands-off and only visited the site every 3-4 months. Other than that, I'd have the monthly updates sent to me by the manager on site. A few months ago, I found out that a couple of the apartments had been left in severe shambles after the tenants moved out, and the cleaning crew we had took care of it. I didn't find out until after the fact that it was not completely accurate because one of the apartments apparently had a bad roach infestation in the storage closet outside the apartment. After the new tenants moved into that apartment, they brought up the issue to the site manager. In the monthly reporting, the site manager claimed that maintenance staff tried to address with it traps and bug bombs. I didn't think too much of it and left it at that. Next month, the same thing, and the third month, after receiving the monthly report, I called the site manager stating there is a reoccurring issue and I wanted it taken care of professionally. At that point, the month's rent was waived for the tenants in that apartment, and they were put up at a hotel for a week while the issue was to be addressed. Once they returned to their apartment is when the issue started. The site manager, either by mistake or by negligence, didn't communicate with the exterminators the extent or the location of the infestation. Instead of the storage closet, the apartment was fumigated, and after that, the roaches made their way into other apartments in the same building and the nearest building. And the problem got so much worse, the same option was given to all the tenants in that building, waiving the month's rent and putting them up in a hotel for a week while the issue is addressed. They all took that offer up. However, one of the tenants decided to take legal action. While I wasn't happy about it, I understood where they were coming from, having their lives disrupted by something that should have been addressed properly to start. As we were midst negotiating with them during mediations, my lawyer reminded me of the clause with the property management company and suggested we give them what they want. That is where I started my nuclear revenge. I had the rest of the tenants from the 2 impacted buildings be suggested to anonymously that one of the tenants had filed a lawsuit for the damage, and they should do the same by getting in on it. Through the mediation, I pretended to be outraged at the whole matter. The negotiation started at 3 months of free rent, but ultimately we all settled on 1 year of free rent for all those tenants. Overall, that came out to 16 apartments with rent averaging from $17,000 monthly that the property management had to pay for due to the negligence of the site manager, equaling to roughly $325,000 in just the lost rent they had to pay for, and the cherry on top due to the breach in service for property maintenance. They also have to provide free services for up to 6 months while I seek out a new property management company, costing them an additional $146,000 and still pay for the legal fees on top of that. TLDR, site manager screwed with my tenants' homes, so I cost the property management company over $500,000 in damages, lost rent, and legal fees. Try to sexually harass my grandma. You might take back a nub. Recently learned about the revenge subreddits and have been enjoying some of the stories. As I've pondered things, I figured I'd share a few tales myself. This first tale though involves my grandmother, so let me start this by saying I'm on mobile and English is my first language, so please be harsh if you see any errors. Also a short TLDR at the bottom, setting early 60 seconds, medium-sized Midwestern city, local neighborhood bar. The title of this story comes from my grandma's old saying. See, my grandma always carries a switchblade in her purse for protection, and she said if anyone ever tried to attack her, they might get her, but she's gonna take a piece of them. hence her term I'll take back a nub. Some context about my grandma before we get into story time. My grandma was born in the Deep South back in the 30s. She was one of 4 sisters who I will refer to for the rest of this as the 4 sisters. My family decided to migrate up to a northern Midwest city in the 50s. Just for clarification, my family is African American. So if you know anything about United States history, you would understand why they would want to escape the Deep South during this time period. My grandma was 20-something when she moved north with her husband. My grandfather, the rest of her family, her sisters, mother, and uncle also moved up north because of housing discrimination. My grandparents were forced to live in the black neighborhood. The rest of the family also lived in this neighborhood and were basically within walking distance of each other. The thing to know about the 4 sisters that they were all Spitfires. They are some of the most caring women you can know, and were all excellent mothers and grandmothers, but they were not to be trifled or messed with. If you crossed one of that might be your ass. This was especially true of my grandmother, who was all of 5'0" and fairly petite. The 4 sisters were quite the characters, and it didn't take the neighborhood long to know of these 4 sisters because of their crazy antics. They also loved hanging together on the weekends, either at one of their houses or sometimes at the local watering hole. On this particular night, my grandma wanted to go out for a few hours with her sisters. Only one could go. Aunt C, my uncle, my grandma's oldest son, was in charge of watching his siblings for a few hours on this lovely Saturday night as my grandma dressed to the nines and headed down about half a mile to the local bar to meet up with her sister. This was a pretty small bar that got a lot of regulars. My grandma had been there dozens of times and has plenty of stories to tell about her time there with her sisters and also with my grandfather. My grandma and Aunt C are lounging in the bar having a couple of drinks and cracking some jokes with some of the regulars when a new character is introduced to the scene. This guy's name is Leroy. He was a regular as well. To picture this guy, I want you to think about a guy as skinny as Jimmy Walker and about the height of Kevin Hart. Combine this and make him about the age of 40 and you'll have Leroy. Almost everyone will know Kevin Hart, but if you're not sure who Jimmy Walker is, look up the sitcom Good Times and you'll figure out who he is. Leroy was a regular at the bar too, but then again, Leroy was a regular at almost every bar in town. You see, kids, before the internet, online dating apps, and hookup sites, the way most people met was at bars. Our good friend Leroy was notorious for wanting to have one-night rendezvous with the ladies at the bar. Well, everyone knew his game, and after he has had a few one-night stands with some of the ladies in the neighborhood, most now avoided him like the plague. This of course didn't stop him from going to bars on a weekend, trying his best to shoot his shot and hoping a lovely filly might come home with him for the night. Leroy had flirted with my grandma and aunt on previous occasions, and even though he was told that they were both happily married, he kept trying to have conversation with them. As soon as he entered, he once again strolled over there trying to see if he could get some action with either of them. My grandma quickly told him not to waste his breath, but he sat down anyway. What surprised my grandma was that behind Leroy was another dude. He was well over 6 feet tall and handsome. My grandma honestly couldn't recall this guy's name, so we'll call him Jerk. My grandma knew right away that this Billy D. Williams wannabe was gonna try to sweet talk and charm his way into some lady's pants that night. It seems that he had his sights set on his first target, which would be, of course, my grandmother and my Aunt C. It seems like our good friend Leroy was gonna try to be Jerk's wingman. He started off with some small talk to my grandma, couldn't tell her how gorgeous she was and something about, getting lost with heater eyes and all the other nonsense. My grandma said that he had diarrhea of the mouth and pretty much let what he said go on one ear and find the nearest exit. My grandma quickly shut this clown down and let it know she wasn't interested. So then he set his sights on my aunt. Now my aunt can take care of myself. My grandma was always a little protective of her. Jerk made a comment by how nice my aunt's thighs were as he looked lustfully at her. My grandma quickly told this fool that my aunt was married and not interested in his nonsense. This is where the story changes and revenge comes into place. I'm gonna try to write this dialogue as best as she recalls it. Grandma, she's not interested and she is happy married. Jerk, she can speak for herself. Jerk, your legs must be tired because you've been running through my mind all night. Yes, this fool used a pickup line. Grandma, are you hard of hearing or something, or a little slow? I told you she's married and not interested. Jerk, bitch, you talk too much. Maybe I'll put what's my pants down your throat. He actually said his D, but not sure if I can use that word. Ladies and gentlemen, this is where shit got real. Yes, everybody else in the bar knew you wouldn't and shouldn't talk to my grandma that way. She didn't play for that nonsense. This is one of those times where you could actually hear a pin drop as everyone got quiet. My grandma exploded with expected "What the fuck did you just say?" My grandma was seething with anger, but jerk face played off as it wasn't a good idea. My auntie knew it was about to go down. She grabbed my grandma and started leading to the door. You see, my sister knew what many other people knew, and that is my grandma kept a .38 snub-nose revolver in her purse and typically kept a very sharp switchblade wrapped up in her bra. My aunt tried to lead my grandma out of the bar to avoid any more confrontation. But my grandma wasn't having it, as she was being pushed out the door by my aunt and another male customers. My grandma seized a nearby beer glass and flung it towards Jerk. Fortunately, glass didn't hit him and erupted close to his feet, but it certainly got his attention. This well over 200 lb man jumped out of his chair, storms towards my grandma saying that he will kick her ass. My grandma replies, bringing on, bringing on. She eventually gets fully outside and he decides to come outside. He's a little apprehensive because a couple of the neighborhood bar dudes had gotten up to see this and he's afraid they might get involved. You know, since it's unacceptable for a man to hit a woman and all that jazz, the guys said they're not gonna do anything and just want to watch. My grandma quickly pulled out the switchblade that she had in her bra, unwrapped it from the paper and looked him in the eyes and said, "Come on, mother." You would think at this point any civilized person might be apologizing further for the crude language he used earlier. Or you would think that the guy, seeing that my grandma had heels on, might just walk away knowing she's probably not gonna chase after them. Do you think this clown chose either option? If you said he chose neither option, you would be correct. Let's give you a prize, son. With a woman with a switchblade bearing down on him, he decides to stand his ground and doubles down by again calling my grandmother a bitch and telling her he's going to beat her ass. He next starts putting up his fist ready, it's ready to go to town. No worries. No one says my grandma has to fight fair, fight fair. You see, what this clown forgot about was my aunt. While Jerk has his fists up ready, starts striking like he is Mike Tyson. My aunt has conveniently took off one of her high heel shoes. She uses the heel to bash him right in the shoulder blades. Of course, this staggers our young Jerk as he turns looking at my aunt screaming obscenities. It gave my grandma time to come and slice this fool right in the side. As our young Jerk howls in pain, my grandma says to him, "Maybe I should slice something else off." The Jerk staggered sideways, looking at T-Lee's two infuriated women, one with her high heels still in her hand and the other with the switchblade with the sight of his blood on it. Don't worry, he wasn't too badly hurt as she sliced him but didn't stab him. By this time, a few other people are stepping in and are trying to calm the situation down, and Jerk left the scene. The aftermath. My grandmother heard from others that the Jerk went to the hospital and got treatment for getting sliced on the side. This was the 60s, so no cops were called, and if they had been called, they probably would been really slow getting to the scene. No idea what he told the hospital staff and doctors, but regardless, heard he got patched up and was no worse to wear. Rumor has it that he ended up moving to Chicago a few months later. He never tried to get revenge on my grandma for this, so there's that. My grandma says she wasn't gonna tell my grandfather about what happened. He was an over-the-road trucker and was out of town when this event happened, but you know how things quickly go through the grapevine. He of course scolded her for this, but she just gave him a wicked smile and said that the asshole deserved it, and that he came at her so it was self-defense anyway. Not sure that's exactly entirely true, but that's what she's sticking with. My grandma continued going to that bar every once in a while and was a bit of a legend. Our friend Leroy ended up being the epitome of a deadbeat dad. Rumor has it that he has something like 10 kids with 8 or 9 different women. My grandma still has the switchblade, and yes, she showed it to me. It's somewhere in her massive collection of items now. Otherwise, I'd attach a picture of it. I also learned that my grandma is a woman of her word because she actually took back a nub in the form of an ounce of flesh from this asshole. Hopefully you enjoyed this story about my grandma. She has told me the story a few times and was a little fuzzy on couple details, as she's in her 90s now. But I'll do my best to answer any questions. TLDR, grandma goes to the bar with her sister to be sexually harassed by this asshole who can't take no for an answer. The moron uses obscenities and calls my grandma derogatory names, so she and my aunt get paid back on the fool outside the bar by slicing him with a knife. Tell others I hit my dog. See what's coming for you. Hi, got a story here. Me and my husband, 28F, 29 meters, are in a chicken breeding club, which provides an allotment garden-like structure. We joined a year ago and got to know Klaus, an old man who actually lives in one of those said gardens. At first, he was very kind, helped out 1 or 2 times, but after a while, he got very greedy, telling us to help him in his garden, selling stuff for him on eBay, or care for his chickens. Some people said we should keep our distance from him, But we didn't listen. He regularly invited us to drink a beer with him, acted like he knew all of town, is well known and has many connections. But the real thing was, yes, he was known, but for all the bad reasons. We talked to him a lot in the first few months, noticed he's highly addicted to alcohol and tries to make a dime out of everyone and everything. You know the saying, blood is thicker than water. Not for him, lol. At first he helped us out, for example, with giving us some tools for free or giving us money for working over at his place. Also, we kinda felt bad for him, living your last days in a garden shed. But after a while, he gave us near to nothing for our work. No money, broken tools, so garbage we had to dispose of. Not even a thank you. He also started to talk to us in a very demanding tone, old male Karen-like. Instead of messing with him, we started to simply distance us from him. Not doing any more work. His last effort to win us back was to buy 20 wheat plants and putting them in his garden and showing us. He knew we smoked, but as soon as he demanded we sell his future 5 kilos, we backed off again. As others noticed, we didn't hang out with him anymore. They started to tell us how Klaus truly is. He started to live there as soon as another club member, since Dad lost his home and lived on his farm over there. As for the rules of the club, it's not allowed. If he is allowed to, Klaus had to be too. Klaus lived there for 14 years, not because he got homeless or another stroke of bad luck in life, because he wanted to live as inexpensive as possible. We learned he had loads of debt. No wonder, considering how much he drank. We found out this is the case since he was old enough to drink. He tried to rip everyone off their money. Since ever, his brother, his best friend, even his wife. Some say if she was still alive, he would sell his own mother. As the weeks went by, we learned more and more about him. That he had done this with nearly everyone who joined the club. Not only with us, we saw it too, as a new member, who's also mentally disabled, cut his hedge for him for 16 hours and got $20 and no thank you. Klaus started to dislike the way we stayed out of his way, so his response to that was to talk crap about us, even threatened us to tell others that we smoke. Illegal over here, I mean real full-fledged lies. For example, we would owe him $200. We would do parties till late at night at the farm. We would hit our dogs. At that last point, we snapped. We bought a drone, made pictures of his wheat plants and got police involved. Get them before they get you law. Klaus peacefully sat in the club's community house, drinking beer. 9 o'clock in the morning, as 10 police officers walked in, going directly into his garden. Little Klaus turned his head around like an owl and immediately stood up and walked outside. He asked one cop, "Hi, can I help you?" And they asked for his name. "Oh, Mr. Klaus, we were actually looking for you," behind the officer talking to him. The other cops raided his farm, not only finding the plants, but discovered themselves he lives there. Living room with obviously used bed, food leftovers, a TV. They asked him where he has his address. He told them the address of his long-deceased brother. They sent a car to this address, but found no clue he could be living there. BTW, he also got money from the state. Social benefits, also meant to cover his rent. The rent on this farm is $30. YER, so huge no-no. Money fraud is one of the worst things you could do over here. The cops stayed at his farm for the next 4 hours, collecting evidence. The whole farm surroundings were patrolled by some cops. So, word spread like a wildfire. Every single farm owner got over there to see what was happening, cheering that this douche finally got what was coming for him. After ripping off so many people, it was amazing. This dude had 14 years to make this farm his little hidey hole, making money out of it. He had split the whole community, gave us a bad name overall, and not even breeding chickens. He just had them to sell the eggs SMH. To his luck, he was clever enough to tell the cops it's only CBD. Still illegal, but not as much, so they had to send it in to test it, buying him some time. The club held a meeting. That was a shit show. As soon as this topic started, he said we planted them there. He only gave us the little plot. Most laughed. Some said nothing. We voted for his eviction. Had to. As of the rules, he got 15 against him. Just 3 voted for him to stay. So, our revenge is not over yet. Keep you updated. TLDR, old parasitic money greedy dude got kicked out of his home and may be going to jail soon for growing marijuana. Your bully son messes with us and you kill our dog. Prepare for dad. This happened in 1995 on a small rural town in Chaco province, Argentina. Everyone knows each other here until this very day. My father was an electrician, the only one in town. So he was constantly meeting people, and as he was born and raised here, he was very well known by everyone. He grew up with many of the police officers from back then, and they even had asados together. Argentinian BBQ at least 3 times a month for years. My father was not a violent man. That was the only time I saw him do something like that. The other man with his busy son. They were not from town. They had moved here a year or so prior. They were from Buenos Aires. I don't really knew the guy, only his kid, who was an absolute asshole to almost every kid in the block, and he constantly picked on me and my brother since we were the youngest of our neighborhood. Therefore couldn't defend ourselves. Bucky wasn't trained since we knew nothing about training. But he was loyal and playful with every kid. One thing for sure, though, he was protective. One afternoon we were playing in the park and out came Bully Kid, who at first threw rocks at us, then got closer and started calling us names, and us being little got scared. He was bigger than us. We tried to leave, but he blocked us and started hitting my brother. I tried to stop him, but he did the same to me. Bucky heard us crying and came running, jumping and getting the bully's arm at once. He bit, shook and released, staying between us and the bully, barking like mad until the kid left running. We saw High get inside his house, and a few seconds later came Father with the sledgehammer. Bucky stood in front of us, hairs raised and barking, but the man didn't stop. He got close, raised the sledgehammer, and went straight down to Bucky's head. He did not him once. He hit him 5 times. The first blow I'll never forget. The sound of the steel connecting with the skull. The painful whimper of our dog. Bucky got knocked with the first blow. By the 5th and final, his head was caved in. My brother and I were frozen in place, scared to death, crying a lot. The asshole dad say something which I don't remember now, and left. We were unable to move for a moment. Such was our fear. Finally, I grabbed my brother and went home. Dad was fixing a fan, and when he saw us, asked us what happened. We told him and just said, "Right, okay, let's wash your faces and grab some ice cream." Yes, that's what our dad did. Took us for ice cream. He did a pretty well job to mask his emotions and showed himself cheerful to us. That night, when brother was asleep and I was playing in the kitchen, he grabbed the wrench, told Mom and I he had to fix something in the neighbor. I assumed it was another neighbor since it was a common thing for my dad to get asked by neighbors to fix things. Nodded to Mom. Mom nodded back. Yes, she knew and left. He came back some minutes later, told me to go to bed, and that was it. A decade later we came to know what happened. He went to the guy's house, knocked on the door and punched the dude so hard it rocked his head back. Told him he would break 1 limb for each of his children whom he made cry. I can only imagine what he would have done if we were more than 2 kids. Proceeded to beat the guy some more in front of his family, and then took the wrench and broke his legs. He then left the house, went home, asked me to go to bed, talked to Mom and went straight to the police. Turned himself in and was actually delayed until the police went and checked with the other guy. My dad also showed our dead dog to them, and the police found the sledgehammer on the bully's house still with blood on it, and they let my father go. They also spoke with the dude when he got better and suggested him to leave the town, since if they weren't liked before, they wouldn't ever be now. To this, you gotta understand the mindset from some small rural towns. We looked at outsiders with mistrust back then, and it took a while for people to get used to you if you were new in town. However, these people came and weren't very much liked, apparently because of the kid, and the father was also an asshole. I do not condone the actions of my father, nor am I justifying in any way the events that transpired then. But as a father myself, I can totally understand to what extent can a man react when kids are at play. I love my dad and I have mad respect for him. RIP, Dad. We miss you greatly. So there, that's the full story. Sorry for my bad English. It is not my native language. My school actually protected me even though I was harassed outside the school premises. This occurred over a decade ago. It happened at the end of my senior year of high school. I am from India, and girls are still afraid to tell others about being harassed because of shame and society. I was enrolled in a big school. There were almost more than 800 students in my school. So you can imagine the rush and crowd while leaving the school. It used to get so crowded and chaotic because there were parents' cars and auto rickshaws waiting to pick up the kids. Some kids are riding their bicycles through the crowd, while others run to the nearby vendors for pani puri and samosas. It's almost like an amusement park. One day, while walking hand in hand with my friend, I spotted this weird straggling man looking through the bunch of kids. I thought he might be looking for someone specific and didn't think much about it. But I must admit he was creepy. I saw him again a few more times daily, but one day, when I was walking with my friend, making our way through the crowd, that man crossed me. I was about to collide with him and tried to avoid him, but instead he pushed me and grabbed and pinched my chest area so hard that it began to hurt a lot. He was so smooth with his actions that my friend, who was by my side, couldn't tell what happened. She kept asking me what was wrong, but I just walked mindlessly to my auto rickshaw and sat there and told her to go away. She understood and walked away. As she used to live nearby, I was so shaken that when I got home and saw my parents, I burst into tears because I am the only child. I was never afraid to tell my parents anything, and I told them everything. My dad was pissed, and that's where our revenge started. I have never seen my dad so angry before. He drafted a plan to trap Sleazeball with his friends. We will name them Uncle 1 and Uncle 2. My dad was friends with our school principal. He visited him when I was attending my school the next day, as if nothing had happened. As they told me not to tell anyone, our principal was great and assured us that even though it happened outside the school, they would fully cooperate to trap the sleazeball. At lunch, they called me into the principal's office and told me that Uncle 1 and Uncle 2 would be scattered in the crowd with my English teacher. The school gatekeeper will be near me and my dad will be near the shop where I usually spot the man. They instructed me to walk normally with my friend and avoid them as if they were strangers, but to alert the nearest person as soon as I spotted the sleazeball. My dad and others were there the whole day, and at 5 p.m. it was time to execute the plan. As I was instructed, I was walking casually with my friend. She asked me several times because she knew something was odd, but I told her to shush and enjoy the show, and then I spotted the sleazeball actually harassing my other classmate, and I quickly alerted Uncle 1. Initially, it was planned not to hit him and just call the police, but he was caught in the act, so Uncle 1 dragged him away and started beating him. Soon my dad, Uncle 2, and the gatekeeper joined him. Then my English teacher handled the situation and dragged the sleazeball inside the school gates and into the principal's office. My classmates surrounded me with questions, and I gladly answered them and stayed outside the gates with them. After a few minutes, I was called into the principal's office, where I saw the sleazeball. I thought they might ask me some questions, but the principal gave me some apple juice and told me to relax. Sleazeball was there crying, begging to let him go as he would never do it again. He was badly bruised and his clothes were torn. After a few minutes, the police came and took the sleazeball, and he was giving me such a deadly look that it still gives me the chills. My father and everyone else in the room were so happy and smiling as if there was a celebration, and told me that they were so proud of me as I had saved multiple girls that day. I still don't know the details, but the school took full responsibility for our safety, put that man into jail, and CCTVs were installed within a week, even in a parking lot to cover the area outside the school. Got fired for not complying with misogyny, and it ended up in the store closing. I worked at a very popular cell phone chain store in the mid-2000s. I was in college and had only been working at this place for a few weeks after leaving a long-term job at an electronics store. So it's maybe my 6th or 8th shift at this store. I'm part-time. I'm the only female. The manager comes up to me in the middle of the shift and tells me I need to do the dishes in the back. There was a little kitchen area where we could eat lunch, and dishes were piling up on the sink from people who weren't cleaning them when using them. I responded that they were not my dishes. I didn't use dishes at work, and if I did, I would have cleaned them when I was done. The manager tells me too bad. I have to do what he says. I need to go do the dishes. We proceed to get into a giant argument. I'm not your maid. I didn't get hired to clean up after lazy employees. I got hired to sell cell phones. After arguing for several minutes, I tell him to fuck off. I'm not dealing with this shit. I walk out. The next night I was scheduled, and the manager ended up working by himself. That night a riot happened at the mall. Stores were broken into and robbed. He was by himself. He couldn't get everything closed fast enough, and the store ended up getting raided. The store ended up closing a week later. I don't know if it wouldn't closed anyway, but I like to think my fuck you had a little part. My old job happily took me back and gave me a raise. Steal my booze. I'll send the cops and apartment management after you, all to count because this wasn't exactly legal. I'm a college student going into my sophomore year. I just moved back into my apartment a few days ago since class is starting back up soon. Of course, my friends and I threw a small party at my place since we haven't seen each other all summer. It was pretty early in the evening, so nobody had shown up yet. My roommate and I were sitting on our balcony drinking lightly And the girls in the apartment directly above us were also out on their balcony. Naturally, we started talking to each other from our respective balconies, and I ended up inviting them down to my place. They came down, and since there were now more people than planned, we had to go get more drinks. My roommate and I made the admittedly stupid decision to leave them in our apartment alone while we went across the street to the liquor store. When we came back, the girls were gone, and so was the beer we had in the fridge. I opened the door to my balcony, and I can hear the girls up there laughing and telling their friends about how they store our shit. My roommate wanted to go yell at them, but I said we shouldn't escalate drama with our upstairs neighbors so early into the year. However, as the night went on and the more drunk I got, the less I gave a fuck. I knew exactly what type of beer they had, since I was the one who bought it. I walked across the street to the liquor store again and picked up a 6-pack of that beer. I waited until about 11 p.m., maybe closer to midnight. I don't know. Now that the night had really gotten started, there's more police out and about. I pull my new 6-pack out of the fridge and go out on the balcony. Remember how their balcony is directly above ours and how they're making a bunch of noise up there, clearly having a party. Well, my friends and I were just quietly playing poker, so if a few glass bottles were to hit the sidewalk right underneath us, who would be the more likely suspect? I think you get where this is going now. I put a beer on the railing and pushed it off the ledge after I dropped the second one. This is starting to get a little more risky and we needed a little more OPSEC. My roommate went outside, crossed the street, and every few minutes called me when it was safe to drop another bottle. Nobody walking underneath, nobody staring up at us, and no cop cars around. I couldn't drop just one bottle, because that could just be seen as a simple accident not warranting much of a response. But 6 glass bottles, minutes apart, someone must be up to some hilarious party tricks. I went down to the front desk of my apartment to report the girls above us for dropping the bottles off of their balcony. The cops ended up coming and gave out a bunch of tickets to them for underage drinking. I know this because I was eavesdropping on their conversations from down below. Their whining and crying and cursing was music to my drunk ass ears. Best part is they still have no idea it was me. Popular girl in HS got mad at me for telling her that she left her car's headlights on. In my senior year of high school, I generally arrived to school 20 minutes, 30 minutes early and park in the same spot. My friend would park next to me and we'd chat before we had to go to class. A very pretty, popular girl often parked close to us. I'll call her Becky. Though we had plenty of friends, we never interacted with Becky, which was fine. The school had 2,000 plus students and she was part of a different crowd. One day Becky parked next to me and hurried off to class. After a minute I noticed that her car's headlights were still on. I mentioned it to my friend and after some discussion I said that I was going to go find and tell Becky about her headlights. My friend joked that I better not or my GF might get jealous. I walked into the school and saw Becky across the quad sitting next to her friends and reading a textbook. I approached and tried to get her attention, but she seemed determined to ignore me. Finally I said, "Hi Becky, Becky cut me off. "I don't want to talk to you. Leave me alone, creep." At this point all her friends had stopped talking and were staring at me. I felt uncomfortable, but I took a breath and said, "Sorry, I just noticed that you left your car headlights on and I thought that you should know." She scoffed at me. "What, are you stalking me?" I said no and then quickly walked away. Over the next week I told everyone that parked near us what had happened and everyone agreed that Becky had been ridiculous. About a month later Becky left her lights on again. Instead of telling her, I went around to everyone else hanging out in their cars and convinced them that telling her wasn't worth the trouble. That afternoon after school ended, Becky was going from car to car asking if anyone had jumper cables to help her start her dead car. Though most of my friends kept jumper cables, we all politely declined to help her. I wasn't cold at night, but he was. So, I'm in military college, and I was on base and I shared a room with someone. This guy was rude, disrespectful and lazy, as in constantly making rude comments towards me, going out smoking when there wasn't time for that, and overall just being a dick. So one night, the night before we go out into the field, I was checking my gear, making sure everything is working properly and nothing is broken. I noticed that the zipper of my outer shell of my sleeping kit was broken. So instead of asking for a replacement, I just switched mine with his. Turns out he also had to get out for guard duty at 4 in the morning while we slept there, so all the heat left his shelter nice and quickly low. So yay, he was very cold, and I was nice and warm. Embarrassingly cheap boss tries to rip off a customer, gets blocked by me, the underpaid employee. mobile phone, so please excuse the format. I am educated and experienced but have a disease that limits my ability to work long hours, so I picked up a part-time job at a luxury store near my house. We deal in higher-priced items and occasionally buy or consign items. It's important to note I used to have my own business in this field, so I know a bit about the industry. Now, when I was hired, I accepted appallingly low pay because I thought it would be fun and low hours. My bad. The owner is so freaking cheap. They make us reuse garbage bags, and I have seen them make decisions that are ethically questionable, and I just can't stand by and let someone get ripped off. It's also important to note that the owner thinks they are the smartest person in the room, so I am clearly stupid in their estimation. Cue Pettyrevenge. We had a customer come in with their relative's highly expensive couture item. They wanted a price for us to purchase it. Mind you, the item was worth about $25K, but we were only offering them less than 1 divided by 10th of the value. I did not want to see someone get ripped off, so cue Pettyrevenge for 1, being underpaid, and 2, being required to reuse garbage bags, and 3, having to work more hours than I had agreed to. Owner offers a horrible deal. Meanwhile, I'm gushing on about how that item must be worth a darn fortune and how it's a branded item. How fortunate she was to own something so exquisite. The owner tries to talk down my exclamations. I blathered on and on about how I think they should get it appraised and how magnificent it is. The owner steps in front of me and takes over. I, standing behind the owner, am making eye contact with the customer, who has clearly caught on by this point. I'm shaking my head no, as the owner is trying to make the case that it isn't that valuable. They left with their items, and I got a big old talking to about how I just don't understand how the business works, and was berated for contributing to the loss of a sale. To this day, I do my best to block any lowball, insulting offers. When the owner takes over, I refuse to participate and walk away if someone wants us to buy grandma's really expensive items. Oh, and I've started using extra garbage bags too. My significant other was running a double life. Oh, this is the perfect place for this little story. My significant other had a double life. He had a girlfriend that thought she was in a full-blown relationship when he practically lived with me. She thought I was getting in the way of their love story, so she contacted me to give me the what's up. For context, I knew nothing about her, unfortunately. She was the side chick who believed that coming to his place for 1-2 hours once a week to give him sexual favors was a legit relationship. When she contacted me to try to tell me to stay away from her mans, I called him and he freaked out. I told him it was either her or me. He cried and pleaded and told me he can't live without me. I made him dump her on the phone in front of me. I then turned around and dumped him. That was 100% always my plan, LOL. Neighbor moves after I install a camera. I live in a semi-detached house and share a driveway. When I first moved in, an older British couple lived next door. I got along with them great. Then the wife passed, and the husband moved to an apartment and sold the house to someone I will call Sissy. Initially, there were no issues with Sissy, but sometimes she did things that annoyed me. However, for the most part, I was able to ignore her and her extended family. On one occasion, I found the roof of my spouse's car dented after it was left on the street. On another occasion, I found damage to my spouse's car, and the easiest explanation was if someone backed out of Sissy's driveway without looking. I didn't have any firm evidence, just circumstantial evidence, so I installed a camera on my garage that looked out over the shared driveway in the street. I then went and told all of my neighbors about the damage to the car and the new camera. Nobody verbalized any concerns and nobody admitted to the damage. By the end of the next week, Sissy listed her house for sale and it closed quite quickly, and I had a new neighbor. Now, Sissy was a realtor and should have known the law about vacating her old house, but she was still making trips with her stuff long after the new owner showed up. Sissy ended up suing the new owner because she had left stuff behind that she was trying to recover. On one morning as I was leaving for work, I saw the legal papers on the windshield of the new owner's car, so I made a point of asking about them. This is when I learned about all of the drama and the ongoing issues. The new owner indicated that they were going to have to document everything to defend themselves in court. This is where the Pettyrevenge came in. I asked if the new neighbor wanted video footage. I provided footage of multiple loads of furniture being moved past the deadline. I provided footage of Sissy's sister sneaking across my property to try and serve the new neighbor, and then illegally leaving the paperwork on the car. I also provided footage of Sissy driving by at random times. With the footage that I provided, the case was awarded to my new neighbor that had to countersue Sissy. TLDR, I suspect my old neighbor was damaging my car, so I installed a camera. Very quickly, my old neighbor sold and moved, but ended up suing the new owner. I provided the new owner with all of the footage from my camera so that they could win in court. Never treat your staff like shit on the way out. If you don't know where they are going, I recently resigned from my job. I was just tired and burnt out, and my CEO kept pushing me hard, telling me to drive further, and that's just how it was. I was also moving house, and commuting to work would be another 30 minutes on top of 1.5 hours I'm already doing. So enough was enough. I got so tired that I resigned. I hadn't got another job lined up. That's fine. I was okay financially. As soon as I resigned, my CEO called me into the office 20 minutes later and asked me to leave straight away, escorted me off-site like a criminal, and wouldn't even let me say bye to people, touch my laptop, clear my desk. It was like I was being fired. It was so embarrassing. No one from work got in touch to see if I was okay, as he went round telling everyone he fired me and saying it went pear-shaped with her at the end, so I had to let her go. Fast forward a few weeks. Well, I did find another job with one of my ex-employer's clients that used their services to do their emergency training for them, and now I'm in charge of who we use as our contractors. My new boss said, well, we normally use your old company at a cost of $37,000 a year. But if you know another company that is better than Switch, I have no loyalty to them. Well, Switch I have done. If my old boss hadn't treated me so badly, I definitely would have used their services. But treat me like that and say goodbye to a client. Insult my dog. Enjoy your slug-eaten garden. My sister and her husband are spending a lot of time in the hospital with my baby nephew, who has some health problems, so I've been dog-sitting Fred, my sister's 16-year-old dachshund. My neighbor saw me bringing Fred in for the first time and freaked, wanted to know why I was bringing in strays, said that we'd end up overrun if the other dogs found out. She tried to kick poor Fred. He growled because she was shouting at him, but he's so old his teeth are almost useless. He couldn't have bitten if he wanted to, and she could see that. But she still kicked at him because she's evil. Even when I told her he's my sister's dog, she didn't apologize. Just told me to keep his ugly face away from her garden and stomped off. I hate this woman. I can cope with her racist homophobia and all-round nastiness when I'm her target, but Fred is elderly and frightens easily. He's confused and he misses my sister. He deserves to be avenged. Confronting my crazy neighbor will not help. I have learned this through long experience, and so my petty revenge plan was born. I've had a few issues with slugs getting in my house, escaping the warm weather. I used to just put them near my compost heap, but now, I drop them onto her vegetable patch, along with any others I can find lurking. I've even set up some old pots in shady places to encourage them. I'm committed. Every evening she removes slugs from her veggies and gives them a good watering, and half an hour later I drop several big fat slugs over the fence, right on top of her lettuces. By morning her lettuce looks like lace. She's losing her mind, shining torches into every nook and cranny looking for slugs every night. She's setting up beer traps and eggshells and cursing all of mollusk kind. It's glorious to behold. My roommates are assholes, so I made sure to feed the ant colony in our house before I'm leaving. I'm living in a student apartment with 2 other female students. They would always stay up until late, like 2 a.m. and make noise, constantly hurting my sleep schedule and also my ability to do well in exams. I confronted them numerous times about this and I got some disgusting reactions. They would also always leave the kitchen full of unwashed dishes. Like, I cannot remember when was the last time I actually saw the bottom of the sink. They would deliberately leave the key to the apartment door inside the lock so that I couldn't come in without ringing the bell and waiting for them to open the door for me. I came to a conclusion that my best choice here would be to find a new apartment, so I have a few more days left until I leave. And this weekend I'm all alone in the apartment until Sunday, and I noticed an increasing presence of ants all over our dirty kitchen. As I said, they always leave the sink dirty with unwashed dishes, so ants started coming up lately, and they are actually swarming the sink. At first when I realized that, I was like, FK this, I need to kill them. But then I thought to myself, why would I care? I'm leaving in a few days. They can roam around all they want. And then I realized that I have the apartment for myself for the weekend. So I did something very kind towards the ants but very evil towards my roommates. Instead of getting rid of them, I started feeding them. Every couple of hours I would leave them a spoon of brown sugar near the sink where they were all already gathered. I'm hoping they will grow a big colony. Go ants. Update: I started leaving them small chunks of pistachio nuts, and they went wild for them. The only thing is that they seem to be having a hard time moving them around, even though I made sure they would be small pieces. I added some photos of them using some teamwork. Karen asks for a repair. We comply, so I own a little construction firm and we delivered our last building a few years ago. For context, where I live, the underground water level is very close to the ground, so our parking spaces usually have to be waterproof. As we are talking about 2m2 of concrete, there are bound to have some cracks and leaks, and we will fix it in due time. In comes Karen. Her parking spot had a crack that was putting out a little water, and every time she got out of the car, she had to step on a wet surface. Nothing wrong there. Our obligation to fix it, but this woman goes and starts calling me and our team every hour, screaming, disrespecting my employees, calling them stupid, saying she's gonna sue if we don't fix it today, as we all try to calmly explain that we should do that after the rain season is over, but she just won't have it. So we come by and do the repair on her parking spot. Yesterday, in the rainiest week of the year, because of the repair, she has to park her car on the street instead of the garage. For a week, the streets are literally flooded, and now she has to wet a little more than the bottom of her shoes to get home for a week, and that just gave me a little bit of peace. I threw garbage back into the car of the person who dumped it on the street. Walking through my residential neighborhood on the left side sidewalk, a humongous black pickup truck drives up from behind. He pauses along while in an intersection for no apparent reason, then casually sticks his hand out the driver's window and drops a wadded piece of garbage right onto the street. Okay, I'm a coward. I should have dashed out, grabbed the garbage, chased him down, etc. But I'm a woman in my 60s and just not capable of a potentially dangerous confrontation. I am, however, not capable of delayed pettiness. He makes a U-turn and parks at the house just beyond the intersection, a house undergoing construction. I glare at him uselessly as I pass, but he's parking and not paying me any attention. Okay, jerk face. Let's see. Construction site. Big shiny pickup truck. Take out food. Obviously some out-of-town contractor who thinks he can roll up and spew garbage all over my neighborhood. Plan formulated. If the truck is still there, if its window is open, if the contractor is out of sight, and most importantly, if I can find the garbage. 20 minutes later, on my walk back, I take a careful look as I go by. The petty gods smile upon me. Truck there, window open, voices in the house but no one in sight. And there's the food wrapper in the gutter, yellow with some orange. Taco Bell. There's one at the foot of Boulevard at the beach. I snag it, cross over to the opposite side of the street, backtrack a bit, cross back over. Then I walk past again and chuck the wrapper through the passenger side window, covering the action by pretending to adjust my hat, and stroll on. Yes, I'm sure he just tossed it out the window again, but maybe he'll pause a moment to wonder who exactly is watching him and what judgment the gods are passing upon him. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed these stories, then hit the like. See you guys next time.